Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today I want to talk about a rather unpleasant topic that unfortunately pops up from time to time. Let's talk about cheating. During the last MoxMasters Tournament, a fairly well-known cEDH player was caught cheating, which of course led to a DQ and a lot of negative feedback for that person. So I thought to myself, let's have a look at what cheating actually is, why people cheat, how people cheat in online tournaments, how we can detect cheating and prevent it, and how we should punish cheating. So what constitutes cheating and what doesn't? The Wizard IPG defines cheating as follows. A person breaks the rules defined by the tournament documents, lies to a tournament official, or notices an offense and does not call attention to it. Additionally, two criteria have to be met in order for action to be considered cheating. First, the player is attempting to gain an advantage through that illegal action. Note that it doesn't state that the person actually has to gain an advantage. The attempt alone is sufficient to constitute cheating. And second, the person has to be aware that they are doing something that's illegal. While people have been disqualified for stalling or aggressive behavior, these actions do not constitute cheating. A more obvious example of cheating would be a person intentionally drawing extra cards repeatedly or looking at the cards while they're shuffling in order to stack their deck in a favorable way. So yeah, cheating is when you knowingly break the rules of the game in order to attempt to gain an advantage. And while the goal of cheating is usually to win the game, the motivation can differ from player to player. Obviously, some people cheat in order to win the prize money. But some people cheat because of self-imposed pressure to perform well. Some people cheat for the prestige of being a successful or good player. Some people cheat in order to prove to other players how good their specific deck is. Some people even only cheat in the Swiss rounds, because Swiss rounds can be a jungle and they just don't want to lose against random decks and random players that they consider to be under them, and they just want to play in the top 16 against people that they consider good players. Some people cheat because they made a gameplay error, noticed it, and now want to try to fix it because they kind of feel like they don't want to lose the game because of that, and are willing to cheat in order to fix that mistake. And then there are people that cheat because the opportunity arose and they reacted to a bad impulse they had. So the motivation for cheating differs from player to player, which means that not everyone who cheats is immediately the worst person in the world. We could actually differentiate between prearranged cheating and spontaneous cheating. So let's have a look at a few ways people could cheat in an online tournament in order to be aware of them and try to prevent them. There are a few steps that online tournament organizers take in order to prevent cheating. For example, during an online tournament, your cards have to be easily recognizable via webcam. Your webcam has to be positioned in a way so that your whole playing area is visible at all times, as well as the edge of your table and your lap, so that you cannot put cards in your lap. Your hand must always remain in the shot. You have to shuffle on camera and you have to always perform a Brazilian cut after shuffling your deck. Additionally, if your webcam turns off for a specific amount of time, you have to shuffle all your cards back into your library and can't draw a new card. And if your webcam turns off repeatedly, you will be disqualified. So, despite of these additional rules for online tournaments, people still cheat. But how do they cheat? Well, I'm not an expert on cheating, but here are a few examples that we know have happened, and a few examples that I thought of with some friends. Number 1. Knowingly having a non-legal deck. A person could easily just cut 5 cards from their deck without anyone noticing. Especially via webcam, it's almost impossible to tell if there are cards missing from a deck. Deck checks happen extremely rarely, if ever, and the judges mostly check for cards that are in your deck but actually shouldn't be in your deck. So they rarely ever check for your deck actually having all the cards that are listed in the deck list. And removing some cards from your deck can actually help you draw the cards that you need more consistently. Number 2. Proxies with a manipulated card back. Imagine that a person's deck highly profits off a turn 1 commander. Well, if they use MPG to make proxies, they could just put a Jeweled Lotus on the back of half of their deck. And in a moment where nobody will notice, they can just turn a card around and boom, they have a Jeweled Lotus in their opening hand. And while we're at it, why not have 10 Ristic Studies in your deck? Nobody will notice because it's the card back. Whoever checks for the card back. And let's be real, while I've never seen anyone actually do this, it's definitely a possibility. People could do this and it would be extremely hard to notice. Number 3. Different color sleeves. You might now think, haha, that would be super obvious, like anyone could tell, but Actually, it's not super obvious. If you have ever seen Dragon Shield matte black sleeves next to Dragon Shield slate sleeves, it's really hard to tell the difference, especially via webcam, especially if your playing area isn't well lit, and especially if you don't have the best webcam. So there is the possibility for people to just use different colored sleeves and maybe have all their mana rocks in slate sleeves while the rest of the deck is in matte black sleeves. Like, the only way to notice this is if you specifically ask the players to turn their cards around and take a high quality picture and post it. Number 4, the classic, mana weaving. Before any tournament game starts, people sit in the privacy of their own home. So while the cameras are turned off, they could just shuffle their deck and mana weave it, so that they have more consistently good draws and don't get land flooded or land screwed. Number 5, probably the most common cheat, shuffle cheating. Just think about the fact that there are people out there who make their income with close-up magic. So they do magic tricks right in front of your face and you do not notice how they do it. Of course, the Brazilian cut somewhat helps against that, but a very skilled person could even cheat on the Brazilian cut. Luckily though, most cheaters aren't experts on shuffle cheating, and they just try to like shuffle cheat the best cards to the top of their library, which is kind of obvious if you know what to look for. So always make sure that you look at your opponent's hands while they're shuffling and make sure that the top of their deck changes, and then also make sure that they do a proper Brazilian cut. Number 6, having cards outside of the camera shot. This is another way to cheat, and it's probably way easier and harder to notice than shuffle cheating, because a player could just have random useful cards laying around outside of the view of the camera. And the moment they, for example, go to draw a card from the deck, they could just grab a card that they need from a stack of cards that is just sitting there. I've had games where I had the suspicion that this happened because someone like always had the right answer to any impactful spell, and like we kind of thought that they might have a stack of interaction next to their deck somewhere, but we couldn't prove it. But then again, we also stopped playing against that person. And number 7, outside information. A person could easily just print out deck lists from people they know are participating in a tournament. You can just go to their Moxfield page, look for the decks they are playing, and just print out the deck lists so that you have a understanding of what cards might be in their deck. You might not have the exact deck list, but you definitely have a clue of what you will be facing. And without a judge being present in the privacy of your own home, there could actually just be another person in the room giving you tips on how to do your sequencing or what threats you have to be aware of. There even was a player very recently who was caught chatting in the tournament Discord's main chat while they were still being in a game. That definitely wasn't the smartest move, but the person was obviously caught and got disqualified. These are definitely not the only ways to cheat in an online tournament, but definitely the easiest and most common ones. The real question is, how can we prevent cheating from happening in online tournaments? And the honest and truthful answer is, we can't. There is just no way for us to 100% prevent cheating from happening, because you just can't invade the privacy of people's homes while they're participating in an online cEDH tournament. What we can do, however, is to take actions that maximize the risk of being caught cheating and in turn minimize the willingness to actually cheat. So let's go over some easy measures that all of us can take while participating in an online tournament. Number 1, record your games. Recording your own webcam footage as well as the spell table footage via tools like OBS can help you in multiple ways. On one hand, if you are being accused of cheating, you can use the footage to prove that you did not do anything illegal. On the other hand, if you feel like something fishy was going on in your last game, you can review the footage in the break between games, and then you can call a judge and bring attention to whatever you noticed. Most importantly, knowing that every game is being recorded by multiple people will make people rethink if they actually want to go through with the cheating, because the risk of getting caught is just so much higher if 3 or 4 people are watching you at all times. Number 2, being attentive. Personally, I think this is really important. Don't let people shortcut too much. For example, let's say player 1 plays a fetch land, then fetches and shortcuts it to put a Birds of Paradise into play. And they then just pass that turn while they're still fetching. And immediately player 2 starts to take game actions. So now you have to focus on what player 2 is doing, and you can't actually focus on what player 1 is doing while they're shuffling. So they could use that moment to shuffle cheat, for example. And this is something that you want to avoid. So you can actually demand that player 1 finishes all their game actions, fetching in this case, before player 2 takes any actions. Usually it's not a real problem, right? But it can be a problem if the board state is cluttered or if multiple things happen at the same time. You have to be attentive of what's happening at every point of the game. And you can just say that you don't want the shuffling to be shortcut, or you can just say, like, let's take these 10 seconds that you need to fetch up your land and shuffle your library and do the Brazilian cut. Just so we don't have the risk of anyone using the moment to put a good card on top of their library. Number 3, enforcing tournament rules. This sounds obvious, but I've seen a lot of people not actually do it. In order to prevent cheating, you should always demand a Brazilian cut after opponent has shuffled their library. Always start counting the time if someone is being exiled from spell table. Be vocal about it and don't feel bad about it. If everyone would be doing it, nobody would feel like the jerk who is being super strict. But in order to prevent this from being abused by cheaters, you have to enforce it against every player, even against your friends. Because doing it every time establishes standardized behaviors for everyone. So the moment someone loses their connection, just start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And while you are counting, someone else should be calling a judge, so that it is brought to the judge's attention that someone just lost their internet connection and will be right back. Sometimes it just takes like 10 seconds, and that's fine. But if it happens repeatedly, they just have to get a disqualification. I mean, this sucks for people with bad internet connection like myself, but it's just something that we have to do in order to prevent cheaters from abusing this. Number 4, ask for hand size. This is generally so important because you actually need this information in order to have proper threat assessment. But what it also does is that people will have a much harder time to put extra cards in their hand when nobody is looking. And while we're talking about hand size, always demand that a player's hand is visible at all times. And number 5, call a judge. This is what judges are there for. If anything seems fishy, whatever it is, just call a judge. For example, judges are trained in counting cards in order to notice if someone has an extra card in their hand or a card is missing from their hand. And judges also make the final calls if a player will get a warning or a DQ for a game rule violation. Remember that you are not being unsportsmanlike if you call a judge repeatedly. On the contrary, you calling the judge repeatedly in order to make sure that the game functions properly actively helps to maintain the integrity of the tournament, of the format, and of the community as a whole. Okay, so these are some easy measures that we can take in order to maximize the risk of getting caught cheating and in order to minimize the willingness to actually cheat. But what if someone still cheats and gets caught cheating? How should tournament organizers, tournament players, and the community as a whole deal with cheaters? Okay, before we continue, I want to make sure that you understand that the following is my very personal, highly subjective opinion on how to deal with cheaters. And I would love to hear how you would deal with cheaters. I'm not a tournament organizer, nor a tournament grinder, but I have a very competitive nature and I used to compete in different sports, where of course people used to try to cheat to gain an advantage, and sometimes they were caught. And personally, I just hated it whenever it happened, because I just felt betrayed. And therefore, I personally don't think that a DQ and a 6-month ban, like it is standard protocol for wizards, is enough. Cheating undermines the integrity of the tournament, of the format, and of the community as a whole. I strongly believe that if cheating does not have severe consequences for the player, it will lead to either more people cheating or less people participating in the tournament. Because the lower the consequences are, the easier it is to cheat and the more people will be cheating, and this will just turn online tournaments into a complete farce. And for me, this would just have a huge negative impact on the community, and therefore I think that cheating should be handled very seriously and there should be severe consequences for the people that cheated. So the most obvious thing is that people who have been caught cheating should receive a very long ban. And I'm not talking about 6 months, because 6 months for me, that isn't a long time. I'm talking about like 2 to 3 years. Why so long, you might ask? Well, because I don't think that 6 months is enough to make a person reflect on the negative consequences their actions had for the community and the damage they were basically doing. Also, just imagine playing a game or even a final pot against a player who was just caught cheating 6 months ago. Personally, I wouldn't want to play against someone who was just caught cheating, especially if I was like grinding games for a few months in order to prepare for this tournament. If I fought my way through the Swiss rounds and there is a high price on the line and I have a good chance to win it, and then suddenly my opponent is someone who was just caught cheating. Honestly, I would be super pissed to have to play against that person, because in my opinion, there is no way that they can regain that trustworthiness within 6 months. I mean, people need to realize that this whole online tournament thing is a privilege that we have because of a very dedicated group of people who are willing to put the work in order to organize these tournaments. We don't have the right to play online tournaments. It is a service provided to us, and it heavily relies on our honor and integrity as players. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the single player. We need to make a collective effort in order to maintain the integrity of these online tournaments. And we can only do that by being strict and attentive. If we don't do that, the majority of players who are honest and want to participate in an actual tournament will suffer because of a minority of people who are willing to cheat them. And I think that if a person is part of the minority of cheaters, they can just get lost for a few years so that the majority of people who are honest and want to participate in the actual game can play it in peace. And that's it. How do you think tournament organizers should deal with cheaters? Do you think a 6-month ban is enough, or do you have another opinion? Please let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoy my content and want to support me, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, hop over to my Discord server, and please consider becoming a patron. This really helps me out. I have different tiers set up on my Patreon page, so there's something for everyone. And I also provide one-on-one coaching and brewing support in order to help you get your deck list and your piloting to the next level. So if you are interested in that, please let me know via Discord or Twitter. This is Eisenherz and auf Wiedersehen.